Jake sat hunched over his desk, bathed in the soft glow of his desk lamp. He had always been drawn to stories of suspense and intrigue, and now, as a writer, he was determined to craft the ultimate thriller. His latest project, The Unseen Pursuer, was taking him to places he had never ventured before. He had been researching the psychology of stalkers, poring over case studies and talking to experts. The more he learned, the more fascinated he became with the idea of the unseen threat, the person who blends seamlessly into the background while terrorizing their victims. As Jake began to write, he created his protagonist, a stalker who operated with meticulous precision. This character left no trace, no breadcrumbs for the authorities to follow. The victims were left in a state of constant paranoia, unable to escape the feeling that they were being watched. With each passing day, Jake's writing grew more intense. He vividly described the stalkers' surveillance techniques, the way they infiltrated their victims' lives, leaving them with a sense of vulnerability that gnawed at their sanity. The story was gripping, and Jake couldn't help but immerse himself in it completely. He wrote late into the night, the lines between fiction and reality blurring. Sometimes he found himself looking over his shoulder, as if he were the one being pursued. The weight of the story bore down on him, but he couldn't stop himself. He had to see it through to the end. One evening, as Jake sat at his computer, the room bathed in the eerie glow of the monitor, he heard a faint sound from outside his window. It was a soft scraping noise, like the rustle of leaves against glass. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. His eyes darted to the window, and there, in the dimly lit backyard, he saw a figure. It was obscured by darkness, but Jake could make out the silhouette of a person. Panic surged through him as he realized that the figure was watching him. Jake stumbled away from the window, his heart racing. He had created this world of suspense, but now it seemed that it was encroaching on his own life. The line between fiction and reality had become dangerously thin, and he didn't know how to escape it. As the days passed, Jake's paranoia deepened. He became convinced that he was being followed, that the unseen pursuer from his story had crossed into his own existence. He couldn't escape the feeling of being watched, of constantly looking over his shoulder, just like his characters. The unseen pursuer had become more than a story. It had become a haunting presence in Jake's life, an obsession that threatened to consume him. He had delved too deep into the mind of a stalker, and now he was living the nightmare he had created. Weeks turned into months, and Jake's obsession with his story grew. He spent hours each day locked in his office, writing feverishly, trying to capture the essence of the stalker's relentless pursuit. He barely ate, barely slept, his mind consumed by the chilling world he had created. His writing took on an almost manic quality. He wrote about the stalker's careful planning, the way he gathered information about his victims, infiltrating their lives through social media and online forums. Jake's research had taught him the insidious ways in which stalkers operated, and he used that knowledge to make his story all the more chilling. Outside his office, the world continued to turn, but Jake was oblivious to it. His friends and family grew worried, but he pushed them away, telling himself that he needed to finish his masterpiece. He couldn't let go of the unseen pursuer. One night, as Jake sat at his desk, the words flowing from his fingers like a torrent, he heard a noise in the hallway outside his office. It was a creaking floorboard, a soft but unmistakable sound. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. With bated breath, he listened, and then he heard it again, a shuffling sound as if someone were moving cautiously in the dark. Fear gripped him, and he knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to investigate. Slowly, he pushed his office chair back and stood up. His legs were shaky as he made his way to the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the doorknob. He swung the door open and peered into the dimly lit hallway. There, at the far end of the hallway, stood a shadowy figure. Jake's blood ran cold as he recognized the silhouette. It was the stalker, the character he had brought to life in his story. But this time it was different. This time, it was real. Jake's voice caught in his throat as he whispered, "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure didn't answer. It simply stood there, unmoving, its eyes fixed on Jake. Panic surged through Jake's veins, and he took a step back, slamming the door shut and locking it. He stumbled backward, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. The stalker was a creation of his imagination, a character in a story. But as he stood there, his heart pounding, he couldn't escape the feeling that the line between fiction and reality had been irrevocably blurred. The unseen pursuer from his story had become all too real, and now he was the one being pursued. Jake retreated to his computer, his hands trembling as he typed out the final chapters of The Unseen Pursuer. He had to finish the story, had to bring it to a close, as if that would somehow put an end to the nightmare that had taken over his life. As he wrote, the words flowed from him with an urgency he had never felt before. The stalker closed in on his victims, the tension building to a crescendo. And then, in the climax of the story, the stalker's true identity was revealed. With a sense of dread, Jake typed the final words of the story, and as he did, he heard a loud crash from outside his office. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. Jake's heart raced as he realized that the stalker was no longer confined to the pages of his novella. The nightmare had become his reality, and there was no escape. He pushed away from the computer, his chair falling to the floor with a loud thud. He knew he had to confront the stalker, to face the relentless pursuit head-on. With trembling hands, he reached for the doorknob and flung open the door. But the hallway was empty. There was no one there, no sign of the stalker. Jake's breath came in ragged gasps as he searched the house, room by room, but there was no trace of the intruder. He collapsed onto the living room couch, his mind reeling. Had it all been a hallucination, a product of his obsession with the story? Or had the stalker truly been there, only to vanish into the night? In the days that followed, Jake struggled to make sense of what had happened. He couldn't escape the feeling that the stalker was still out there, watching, waiting. He had created a monster, and now it seemed that the monster had turned on him. The unseen pursuer was finished, but Jake's life would never be the same. The line between fiction and reality had been crossed, and he was left to wonder if he would ever truly be free from the relentless pursuit that had consumed him. In the heart of a bustling city, nestled among the towering skyscrapers and neon lights, there was a quaint art gallery that had become the obsession of one man. Jonathan, a mild-mannered accountant by day, had a secret passion for art, one he had kept hidden from the world. But the gallery, with its eclectic collection of paintings and sculptures, had drawn him in like a moth to a flame. It all began innocently enough. Jonathan had stumbled upon the gallery one rainy afternoon while seeking shelter from the downpour. He had entered, expecting to stay for a few minutes, but as soon as he crossed the threshold, he was captivated by the artwork that surrounded him. The pieces were unlike anything he had ever seen, bold, provocative, and hauntingly beautiful. The gallery's owner, a reclusive artist named Isabella, rarely made public appearances, but her work spoke volumes. Each piece seemed to hold a piece of her soul, and Jonathan felt an inexplicable connection to them. He returned to the gallery day after day, losing himself in the vibrant strokes of paint and the intricate details of the sculptures. He became a regular visitor, the staff recognizing him with a nod and a smile as he roamed the gallery's halls. But it wasn't long before his infatuation took a darker turn. He began to follow Isabella's every move, tracking her online presence and attending any public events she was rumored to attend. He started to collect newspaper clippings and magazine articles about her, creating a shrine of sorts in the hidden corners of his apartment. His obsession grew with each passing day. He convinced himself that he was her most devoted fan, the only one who truly understood the depths of her art. He believed that they were connected on a spiritual level, that she had created her masterpieces for him alone. One evening, as Jonathan stood before his private gallery of Isabella's work, he heard a soft voice behind him. Startled, he turned to find a security guard from the art gallery, a concerned look in her eyes. "You've been spending a lot of time here," she said gently. "Is there something you'd like to share or discuss?" Jonathan's heart raced as he stammered out an excuse, claiming that he was conducting research for a book he was writing. But the security guard was not convinced. She had seen the way he stared at Isabella's self-portraits, the intensity in his eyes. She urged him to seek help, to channel his passion for art in a healthier direction. Jonathan, feeling exposed and cornered, hastily left the gallery, vowing never to return. But his obsession could not be quelled so easily. He continued to stalk Isabella online, leaving anonymous messages on her social media profiles, professing his undying love for her and her art. He knew he had crossed a line, but he couldn't stop himself. Isabella, growing increasingly alarmed by the messages, contacted the authorities. They launched an investigation, uncovering Jonathan's history of online harassment and his disturbing shrine of her work. A restraining order was issued, barring him from coming within a certain distance of the gallery and its owner. Jonathan's world unraveled as he was forced to stay away from the one thing that had consumed his life. He watched from a distance as Isabella's career continued to soar, her art garnering international acclaim. But his obsession with her and the gallery never truly abated. In the shadows, he continued to follow her career, collecting every piece of information he could find. He knew that one day, he would return to the place that had ignited his passion and obsession. And as the years passed, his desire to possess the gallery and its enigmatic owner would grow stronger, ensuring that his relentless pursuit would one day reach a terrifying climax. Isabella, the reclusive artist behind the Gallery of Obsession, lived a life shrouded in mystery. She had always been drawn to the world of art, but she had chosen to remain in the shadows, letting her creations speak for themselves. Her striking self-portraits, often painted with a haunting intensity, had garnered her a cult following. For Isabella, art was a means of catharsis, a way to express the complexities of her own emotions and experiences. Her paintings were a window into her soul, each stroke of the brush revealing a part of her that she kept hidden from the world. As her career flourished, so did the intrigue surrounding her. Rumors and speculations swirled, with some suggesting that her art was a reflection of a tumultuous personal life. She had a talent for tapping into the darkest corners of the human psyche, and her works resonated deeply with those who viewed them. But Isabella was fiercely protective of her privacy. She rarely gave interviews and avoided public appearances whenever possible. She preferred to let her art be the focus, allowing others to interpret it in their own way. It was this aura of mystery that had drawn Jonathan to her gallery in the first place. He had become convinced that there was a deeper connection between them, that her art held secrets meant for his eyes alone. He believed that by delving into her work, he could unlock the enigma that was Isabella. Yet as the years passed and Jonathan's obsession grew, Isabella's sense of unease deepened. The anonymous messages and letters from Jonathan had left her feeling violated and exposed. She couldn't understand why someone would be so fixated on her art. Isabella's closest friends, fellow artists who had known her for years, urged her to take legal action against Jonathan. They feared for her safety and believed that his relentless pursuit was a threat to her well-being. Reluctantly, Isabella had no choice but to involve the authorities. She knew that she had to protect herself and her art from this disturbing intruder. The restraining order was a necessary step, but it did little to ease her anxiety. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jonathan's presence loomed over her like a dark cloud. As Isabella's art continued to gain acclaim, she found solace in her work. Each painting, each sculpture became a sanctuary where she could retreat from the outside world. Her art was her refuge, a place where she could express the emotions that she dared not voice aloud. But deep down, she couldn't escape the fear that Jonathan would return, that he would find a way to breach the boundaries that had been set. The gallery, once a place of inspiration and creativity, had become a fortress guarded by security measures and a vigilant staff. Isabella had always believed that art should be a source of beauty and meaning in the world. But now, she found herself grappling with the darker side of creativity, the side that attracted those who couldn't distinguish between admiration and obsession. As the years passed, Isabella's art continued to evolve, reflecting her own journey of self-discovery and resilience. She had faced the darkness that had encroached upon her life and channeled it into her creations, turning pain into beauty. But she knew that the Gallery of Obsession would always carry the scars of Jonathan's relentless pursuit. It was a place where the line between devotion and madness had been irrevocably crossed, a testament to the power of art to both inspire and terrify. And as Isabella continued to create, she hoped that her work would resonate with others, that it would touch their souls in a way that left no room for obsession, only a deep and profound appreciation for the beauty that could be found in the world. The city of Ashford had always been known for its winding streets, historic architecture, and the lingering echoes of a bygone era. Yet beneath the charm of its cobblestone alleys and ivy-covered buildings, there was a darker side that had remained hidden for generations. Nina, a young journalist with a passion for uncovering hidden truths, had recently moved to Ashford. She had been drawn to the city's rich history and the countless stories it held within its walls. Little did she know that her quest for the truth would lead her into a tangled web of secrets, deception, and an unforgiving past. One sunny afternoon, while exploring the city's historic district, Nina stumbled upon an old abandoned mansion that had long been rumored to be haunted. The mansion, with its weathered facade and broken windows, seemed to call out to her, as if begging her to uncover its long-buried secrets. As she approached the mansion, Nina noticed a flicker of movement behind one of the shattered windows. She hesitated for a moment, her curiosity battling with a hint of unease, but her journalistic instincts prevailed, driving her to investigate further. Carefully, she pushed open the creaking front door and stepped into the darkness of the mansion's interior. The air was thick with dust and the musty scent of decay. She pulled out her flashlight and began to explore the dilapidated rooms, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon a stack of old, yellowed newspapers. They were filled with headlines that spoke of a scandal that had rocked Ashford decades ago. A prominent family torn apart by betrayal, a mansion abandoned, and a mystery left unsolved. Nina's curiosity was piqued, and she began to dig deeper into the history of the mansion and the family that had once lived there. She spent hours at the local library, poring over archives and speaking to elderly residents who still remembered the scandal that had shaken the city to its core. The story that emerged was one of love, betrayal, and tragedy. The mansion had belonged to the Hawthorne family, one of the wealthiest and most influential in Ashford. It was here that a forbidden love affair had blossomed between Eleanor Hawthorne, the daughter of the family patriarch, and Robert Sinclair, a struggling artist from the wrong side of town. Their love had been a closely guarded secret, hidden from the prying eyes of society. But when Eleanor's engagement to a wealthy suitor was announced, the young lovers were driven to desperation. They hatched a plan to run away together, leaving behind their families and the constraints of their social classes. On the night they were to escape, tragedy struck. A fire consumed the mansion, destroying everything in its path. Eleanor's lifeless body was found in the charred remains, while Robert was never seen again. The fire was declared an accident, but rumors of foul play and a family's desire to protect its reputation lingered in the shadows. As Nina continued to uncover the details of the Hawthorne scandal, she became increasingly obsessed with the story. She knew there was more to the tragedy than met the eye, and she was determined to unearth the truth, no matter the cost. Nina's investigation into the Hawthorne scandal consumed her days and haunted her nights. She spent hours at the local archives, meticulously piecing together the events that had led to the mansion's destruction and Eleanor's death. The more she learned, the more she became convinced that there was a cover-up, a dark secret that the Hawthorne family had gone to great lengths to protect. She tracked down descendants of the Hawthorne family, hoping to find answers that had been hidden for generations, but her inquiries were met with silence and hostility. The family had long since closed ranks, and they were unwilling to revisit the past. Undeterred, Nina turned her attention to the city's elderly residents, hoping to find someone who had a first-hand account of the events surrounding the fire. It was during one of these interviews that she met Mrs. Emily Collins, a frail elderly woman who had once worked as a housemaid for the Hawthornes. Mrs. Collins, with her thinning white hair and faded blue eyes, welcomed Nina into her modest home. She had lived in Ashford her entire life and had been a witness to the events that had unfolded all those years ago. As Nina listened to Mrs. Collins's recollections, a chilling tale began to emerge. The night of the fire, she had been working late in the mansion, unaware of the young lovers' plan to elope. She described hearing faint whispers and footsteps in the hallway outside Eleanor's room, followed by the sound of a struggle. "I heard Eleanor and Robert arguing," Mrs. Collins said, her voice trembling with the weight of her memories. "I wanted to go to them to help, but I was too afraid. And then there was a terrible scream." Tears welled up in Mrs. Collins' eyes as she recounted how she had hidden in a closet, too terrified to move, as the fire raged through the mansion. She had heard the desperate cries of Eleanor and the frantic shouts of the Hawthorne family, but she had been powerless to intervene. Nina's heart raced as she realized the significance of Mrs. Collins' testimony. It suggested foul play, a struggle between Eleanor and someone else in the moments leading up to the fire. It was a revelation that could shatter the long-held belief that the fire had been a tragic accident. Determined to uncover the full truth, Nina delved deeper into the Hawthorne family's history. She uncovered a pattern of secrecy and manipulation, a family that had gone to great lengths to maintain its image of respectability. She also learned that Robert Sinclair had left behind a series of cryptic paintings before his disappearance, artworks that seemed to contain hidden messages and clues about the events of that fateful night. The paintings, long thought to be lost, were rumored to hold the key to unlocking the Hawthorne mystery. Nina's obsession with the story grew, and she found herself spending countless hours studying the paintings and deciphering their enigmatic symbols. It was as if Robert had left behind a trail of breadcrumbs, a puzzle that only the most dedicated and determined could solve. As she worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery, Nina began to feel the weight of the past pressing down on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that the echoes of the past were growing louder, and that the truth was drawing nearer. Months turned into years, and Nina's investigation into the Hawthorne scandal consumed her life. She had become a recluse, devoting every waking moment to unraveling the mystery that had haunted Ashford for generations. Her quest had taken her to the darkest corners of the city, and she had unearthed long-buried secrets that had been hidden for decades. She had tracked down the descendants of the Hawthorne family, each one harboring their own guilty secrets and fears of exposure. But it was the cryptic paintings left behind by Robert Sinclair that held the key to the truth. Nina had painstakingly decoded the hidden messages within the artwork, and they pointed to a chilling revelation. The fire that had claimed Eleanor's life had been deliberately set. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to reopen the investigation into the Hawthorne scandal. The local authorities, who had long believed the fire to be an accident, were hesitant to accept the new information. But Nina's unwavering determination forced them to re-examine the case. As the investigation gained momentum, tensions in Ashford began to rise. The descendants of the Hawthorne family vehemently denied any involvement in Eleanor's death, but the evidence continued to mount against them. Old wounds were reopened, and the city found itself torn between a desire for justice and a fear of the scandal's consequences. Nina's obsession with the case had taken a toll on her personal life. She had become estranged from her friends and family, who could no longer understand the depths of her commitment to uncovering the truth. Her once promising career had stalled, replaced by a singular focus on the Hawthorne scandal. The echoes of the past seemed to grow louder with each passing day, and Nina couldn't escape the feeling that she was being watched. She began to receive anonymous threats, warning her to abandon her investigation or face dire consequences. But Nina refused to be intimidated. She had come too far to turn back now. She continued to dig deeper, determined to expose the truth and bring closure to the city of Ashford. As Nina's investigation reached its climax, the city of Ashford held its breath. The evidence against the Hawthorne family was overwhelming, and it seemed that justice would finally be served for Eleanor's tragic death. But the truth, as it often does, came at a cost. The revelations tore apart the Hawthorne family, exposing long-held secrets and betrayals. The descendants, burdened by guilt and shame, were forced to confront their family's dark legacy. Nina, however, was not prepared for the final twist in the Hawthorne scandal. As she delved deeper into the family's history, she uncovered a shocking revelation. The person responsible for Eleanor's death had been none other than Robert Sinclair, the man she had once loved. Robert's motive had been a twisted one. He had become obsessed with Eleanor, believing that her family's wealth and status were the key to his success as an artist. Fueled by jealousy and greed, he had set the fire that had claimed her life, all in the misguided belief that her death would propel him to fame and fortune. Nina's world crumbled as she grappled with the knowledge that the man she had been searching for all these years had been the very source of the tragedy she had sought to uncover. She couldn't reconcile the Robert she had known through his art with the man who had committed such a heinous act. The city of Ashford, too, struggled to come to terms with the truth. The echoes of the past reverberated through its streets, leaving a haunting sense of unease. The scandal that had once been buried had now been laid bare, and the scars it had left behind were unlikely to heal. Nina, her obsession finally laid to rest, left Ashford behind, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth. She had uncovered the unforgiving echoes of a tragedy that had haunted the city for generations, and in doing so, she had learned that some secrets were better left buried. As she drove away from the city, she couldn't help but wonder if the price of uncovering the truth had been too high. The Hawthorne scandal had taken a toll on her life, leaving her with more questions than answers and a profound sense of loss. But in the end, she had fulfilled her role as a journalist, to seek the truth, no matter the cost. And in the shadows of Ashford's historic streets, the echoes of a long-buried scandal would continue to whisper their secrets, a reminder that the past could never truly be forgotten.